Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today's topic is gonna be redemption because while I'm on my little internet break here, I've been continuously reading Young Jedi Knights even though I'm not as quick as I'd like to be with it. And I've noticed that the topic of redemption is kind of important to the arc of a very specific character that we're going to talk about, Zekk. But to understand what my complaints about his supposed redemption arc in Young Jedi Knights is gonna be, I'm gonna go back in time a bit and kind of explain to you how redemption, from my perspective, seems to work in Star Wars and how it has been utilized in the past and how I think it's misused in this instance. So let's start with the original redemption story, which is the one about Darth Vader. So let's get some basic facts about Darth Vader straight, even though really everyone knows everything that there is to know about Darth Vader. But let's just do it for, for the purposes of this video. Darth Vader is very clearly evil. That sounds like a silly thing to bring up, but it's going to be important. Darth Vader is very, very clearly a very evil being. Now, why is that important? Well, he did some big no-nos throughout his existence. He subjugated a bunch of people that didn't want to. He murdered a bunch of people, a bunch of different races all throughout his existence, and is responsible for, well, quite a lot of pain, quite a lot of anguish throughout the galaxy. Most notably, he is definitely co-responsible for the destruction of Alderaan. Now, Darth Vader, by the end of the original trilogy, of course, does something that attempts to initiate a redemption for him, which is he turns back to the light side after his son pleaded with him to help him, and he kills his former master, the Emperor Palpatine. Now, in some ways, this is a physical kind of redemption because he has done evil acts throughout his life, and this is an act that is pretty clearly a good one. He has killed the most evil being throughout all the galaxy, throughout all history as well. And he also kind of had his spiritual redemption. He fell to the dark side, he served the dark side, and now he was brought back to the light. And his last act in his life is to serve the light side one last time. Now, what is important about Darth Vader's redemption that is going to be important for the characters we're going to talk about later is that let's spin a hypothetical scenario in which Darth Vader survives the events of Return of the Jedi, which I think is kind of a fascinating thing to ponder on. Like, what would have happened with Darth Vader had he survived the second Death Star? And now, to me, the consequences of all of his actions would be pretty obvious, which means that Darth Vader would have gone to prison, like whatever the prison equivalent for the rebels or then later the New Republic would have been, he would have gone there for all of his life. Now, the only reason I think they would not just outright kill him is he actually did a good thing that Luke Skywalker is going to attest to, and they're going to believe him because why wouldn't they? And I assume Luke Skywalker would plead with them and beg them not to kill Vader. And I think they would, to some degree, honor his wishes, but they would ultimately say, okay, we can't let this guy go. You understand that, right? We can't just let him be, I don't know, a Jedi Master now at your side. He has to pay for his crimes, and he's going to pay for it in prison for the rest of his life without parole, without anything, throw the keys away kind of thing. He probably would be able to speak to Luke and to have him exchange all kinds of information and stories and whatnot. But Vader's life would be decided for him. Let's just say it like that. Now, redemption is because Vader is the big redemption arc of the original trilogy. that meant that redemption became a pretty popular theme throughout all kinds of Star Wars media. The next character I'm going to talk about, and he's going to be important because, the same author is going to make mistakes with other characters as well, is going to be Kip Duran. Now, Kip Duran is an interesting case when it comes to redemption, because we can certainly say that Kip Duran has committed great acts of evil himself, which is that he destroyed at least two systems that we know of. I think it was two. At least it might have been more. And he is definitely responsible for a lot of deaths. He attacked enemies which were not in active combat. That's also important to point out, because people will point out that definitively Luke Skywalker has killed innocent people. I mean, not everyone on the Death Star was, an evil warmonger who deserved death. Lots of them, probably most of them, were just normal people who did nothing wrong, but they were in active combat, uh, you know, on a primarily military construction, which was the Death Star. But, the victims of Kip Duran did not have that privilege. A lot of them were just on normal planets. And true, Karida was, an academy planet, but it was not a planet that was actively, engaged in a conflict right now, like in a direct battle at this moment. So, and of course, it's not only soldiers who are on Karida and who are in the other systems that Kip Duran wiped out, or at least the other system that he wiped out. And the problem with Kip Duran is that, and that makes redemption for him so difficult, is that he'll never be in a defined state of mind during all these occurrences. What I mean by that is, at the time when Kip Duran destroyed planets, with a sun crusher that he had in tow, he was possessed by Exar Kun, or at least he was influenced by Exar Kun. That already brings up the issue here, is that we don't really ever understand what exactly Exar Kun's influence on him was. Because sometimes it's kind of described as, he's the devil, little devil on his shoulder that keeps whispering evil acts into his ear, and Kip Duran, you know, acts on these ideas for Exar Kun, and sometimes it sounded like Exar Kun was just using him as a puppet, and that Kip Duran literally had no control over anything he was doing. And depending on what the individual story in which Kip Duran appears needs him to be, that kind of flip flops around, and that makes it, just kind of impossible to even think about any kind of redemption that he could go through, because you don't even really know if he is responsible for anything. And of course, in the end, all of that is for naught anyway, because he was able to get off scot free by, well, a stupidity mostly. Uh, this is a literal quote by Mon Mothma, chief of state at the time, or kind of already out of office, but she was chief of state in a big part of the Jedi Academy trilogy. She says that we we, meaning the New Republic, are a government, not a military court, which means that Kip Duran is innocent and won't get a trial. First of all, I mean, that's stupid anyway, because Kip Duran is not from the military, so military court is kind of an irrelevant thing to even bring up. But yeah, a republic would have courts that would get people who murdered others on trial. And yeah, Kip Duran just gets to walk it off. It's like, yeah, okay, I did that, and this happened, and we just pretend. That's the thing that I wanted to, get to with all this, is that the universe just pretends as though Kip Duran is a good guy now, and you as a reader are kind of gonna accept it, because yeah, like, Kip Duran is a Jedi now. He's just there. All his atrocities are not brought up because the universe doesn't pay any attention to it. So it's, not quite happened anymore, kind of. So I hope you understood what I was getting at with my kind of rambling about Kip Duran, is that Kip Duran very clearly tried to also be some kind of redemption story. Like, oh, he was doing the wrong thing. He was influenced by somebody a lot more powerful than him. And then at the end of the Jedi Academy trilogy, he did the right thing. He chose the light side. The thing is, choosing the light side is a spiritual redemption. If we just think about Star Wars terms, like turning your back towards to the dark and turning towards the light is a spiritual redemption. Let's just kind of call it that way. In that you are serving the correct master now. You're just not absolved from responsibility for your actions that you did in the past. And I think Kip Duran is already this kind of example where I've seen people point out, like, oh, but Darth Vader had his redemption. Yes, he had. He had a spiritual redemption, meaning he turned away from the dark, he turned towards the light. But, to get back to what I was saying, Vader would have gotten locked away in prison if any logic was applied to a hypothetical Vader survives episode 6 scenario. He would have gotten life in prison. And the same, Kip Duran should have been subjected to the same thing, because Kip Duran has clearly committed atrocities that everybody just kind of ignores. Like, we don't even get a discussion about it in front of a court. Mon Mothma is just speaking something into existence that clearly is not true, meaning that the New Republic is not a court, as if a republic wouldn't have courts, and that's it. That's Kip Duran's arc, quote unquote. It's, yeah, he's done now, move on, don't care about it anymore. It's really unsatisfying because it leaves you less invested in not only the story but the universe itself. Because what kind of universe lets a character that is, not a major character but not unimportant either, just go out after committing murder? I mean, literally, he murdered a lot of people, and that's it. Well, and speaking of that, we're now coming to the topic of the actual topic kind of this video, which is Zekk. Now, Zekk is a new character from the Young Jedi Knights series. I'm not going to go through his entire history, like his entire character story. You can watch our live streams for that, or just, read the book yourselves, of course. But to just summarize it very quickly, Zekk had a pretty hard childhood that he chose. Like, the solo kids, so Jane and Jason, offered him help, and he very explicitly refused. And then later on, when he gets discovered by the Shadow Academy, he pretends as though the Skywalkers and the Solos ignored his potential in the Force, when it's clear that nobody ever knew or ever even got a hint that he could have Force potential. And then he started to commit to evil for no particular reason other than, oh, I guess they are on my side now, or want to teach me things, even though it's clear that they want to use him. And then when we get towards the end of the first act of Young Jedi Knights, or the first arc, let's say, of Young Jedi Knights, where he clearly murders people, and also assists others in murdering people in the attack on the Jedi Academy. That's innocent children dying. That's quite heavy. And I know that Young Jedi Knights hasn't explicitly mentioned any child dying, but it wasn't a bunch of children fighting a bunch of children. It was like a full-on military attack with real warships, adults fighting, really. And Zekk was a part of everything of that, and quite intensely so. And if you're still gonna read Young Jedi Knights, don't forget all of this is gonna happen because Zekk eats a bouquet for dinner. Just keep that in mind. That's kind of the thing that pushes Zekk over the edge, is He's eating flowers, thinking it's a salad. So make of that whatever you will. And towards the end of the first arc, he there is an attempt to redeem him as well, because there is a bomb planted in the Jedi Praxium building, and the Jedi are about to move in to the building. Zekk distracts them from entering by kind of seemingly committing to a fight. Then the bomb explodes with everyone outside safe, and that's it. That sounds kind of abrupt as a sentence, but that's it. That's Zekk's redemption in a nutshell. That happens. The fight is lost for the Shadow Academy. Everything is crumbling, and Zekk is left there, thinking, well, what's going to happen to him now? And I was gonna, just for you to understand, I'm not done yet with Young Jedi Knights, but I knew that whatever is going to happen to Zekk needs to be addressed in the book afterwards. So book 6 is where all of this, falls apart, and then in book 7, I'm like, this is where Zekk's going to appear again, and this is where his future is going to have to be addressed. Now, of course, I know what future Zekk is gonna be sent on, because I've just heard it from the discourse about all of these books. So I knew I wasn't gonna get a satisfactory answer, but I thought, okay, before I make this video, because I knew this video would have to be made at some point, I'm gonna give book 7 a chance. I want to see, do they say anything about him? No. Zekk makes the decision to become a bounty hunter. This is going to be his new purpose in life. And because, he's not evil anymore, that clearly has been achieved, he also can't, in his mind, join the Jedi Praxium, which, fair enough, he should not. And I guess every other normal civilian job is beneath him. I don't know. He wants to use his powers still, just in a more neutral way, I suppose you could describe it. That's the feeling I got. That's not as directly stated as I just said it here, but that's kind of the vibe that you get from this. And that's it. You have to understand, not a single character so far has spoken negatively about Zekk beyond, oh yeah, he clearly made wrong decisions. Like, that's the only thing people are really ever gonna say. They're not gonna get more explicit than this. They're not gonna get in detail about this. This is Zekk's redemption. Zekk has just moved on, and people let him. And don't forget, he never went on trial either. It's not like he's a little kid. Zekk's like 17, at this point probably 18 already, and he has murdered children. And they have parents, they have family, they're gonna be grieving, asking themselves like, what happened to them? Why is nobody outraged about this? Why is this guy just walking around the galaxy being himself without any sort of punishment? He hasn't sat a day in jail. Like, the only thing that he kind of had was being in a room so that his schizophrenia that he had post battle was cured, and when that was done, he was gone. That took, I think, like a few hours or days, maybe at best. And that's it. That's Zekk's entire redemption. No character hates him. He has not had any real life consequences in the universe. He's just now being a bounty hunter and part of a long side plot that's gonna go through, I suppose, the entire Young Jedi Knight series. And why do I even bring this up? Well, Zekk is a pretty, it seemed like, well-liked character. Like, a lot of people remember Zekk in a positive way. That's the feelings that I caught while just conversing with people who already read Young Jedi Knights before and who liked it. Of course, I know lots who don't like it as well. They feel differently about Zekk. But that's it. That's it for Zekk. And now he's just, same thing with Kip Duran. He's just there, and every character pretends that the awful things that happened didn't happen. Like, Jaina is clearly still crushing on him heavily. And it shows, I mean, she's a teenager, fair enough. She can't really hide well if she has a crush, but it's kind of sickening because this guy killed children. And I'm gonna sound like a broken record by repeating this, but it's kind of a big deal. And to tie it back up to my original point, like, what is redemption? Redemption is sinning, doing wrong, doing evil, and then trying to save yourself or be saved from the negative fate that's attached to being evil. You did something that is wrong, you're trying to do good now. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but also acting kind of as repentance for the evil acts that you've committed. And sure, in some way, all these characters kind of might have done it. Because, yes, they fight evil in a very vague universe kind of way. Yes, they fight other evil characters, and that's kind of what they do now. But the thing that separates the redemptions of Kip Duran and of Zekk from somebody like Darth Vader is that Darth Vader, and it's kind of problematic that we never, got to see what would have happened with Darth Vader, because in theory, everything I'm saying about this now is speculation, but I think it's clearly obvious that Darth Vader's redemption never meant that characters forgot who he was. Like, this is a big point in a few books, let's say, how Leia views Darth Vader. Darth Vader has clearly, like, the last act of his life was the ultimate good, which is to destroy the ultimate evil for his son's sake and for the universe's sake. But Leia never forgets all the horrible atrocities that he's committed. You can see this in Truce at Bakura, in Tatooine Ghost. It's clear that his actions have consequences, and those are real three-dimensional characters that have to interact with everything that's occurred and adapt their worldview to all these acts. Leia can clearly see a horrible evil man who has been complicit or, directly involved in wiping out all of her people, subjugating countless of races throughout the galaxy, and killing more than most people ever could even think of. But he also is very clearly important to Luke Skywalker and his idea about his past and what he's supposed to do now that everything's done. And he very clearly, very obviously did the ultimate good when no one else would have been able to do so, which is to kill the Emperor. That was his choice to make. No one else was able to do it at the moment that it happened. But all of this, all these good things that he's done, and all the good things that he probably would be able to do if he survived, all of this does not mean that the past didn't happen. He committed horrible crimes. As soon as his enemy was going to get a hold of him, he would be in prison for life. It's very important. And we're ignoring that with Kip Duran and Zekk. They are characters who have survived. And not only do people have to deal with the horrible crimes they've committed, but these people are also still around and they need to face judgment. And we're pretending as though judgment isn't even an option. They don't get a trial. Nobody really reprimands them for their crimes. They just walk away, and next book we kind of pretend nothing happened. So how do you do redemption? Acknowledge the past. Don't ignore it. How don't you do redemption? Pretend nothing's happening and just move on. It's never a good strategy. It clearly doesn't work.